So I want to call the Hopkinton Special Town Council remote meeting of May 13th, 2020 to order with a moment of silent meditation and salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay. Tonight is our discuss revised proposed fiscal year 2021 budget, including expense, revenue, capital improvements. I'd asked maybe before we get into some of the budgetary items, Brian, just to kind of give us a recap of where we went and been and what we've done and what his outlook is for this fiscal year and next that we'll be voting on and hopefully approving it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Before Brian does that, there's something I wanted to do.
Okay.
It's very unusual. It's very rarely done, and it's only done for exceptional times. And I think this is an exceptional night, given that Charahoe has not scheduled a meeting of the Charahoe vote. I'd like to add to the agenda that we discuss and consider whether the Charahoe budget shall be scheduled and voted upon.
Okay.
I thought I had Councilman Vice President Scott Bill Hurst. I did call.
So maybe we could just have a decision on whether to add to the agenda and then discuss it after we do the budget.
I will, you make that a motion, I'll second it.
It is.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Motion was made and seconded. Any discussion from the council on this? Okay. Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
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 It looks like it's 5 ayes. Okay. All right.
They say aye.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah. So, all right. So I'll have Brian give us a recap of where we are and where we're going, I guess, and state of the town, so to speak, from a financial aspect. And Brian, you have the floor.
Yeah, so starting with the current fiscal year, we were fortunate in the sense that our tax billing was earlier than most cities and towns, so that was helpful. We got our third quarter payments in before things really got too dicey with the coronavirus. Also, the other thing that has kind of benefited us is that this happened towards the end of the fiscal year as opposed to the beginning of the fiscal year. So at this point, we're in good shape with tax collections. Our departmental revenues are pretty much met the budgeted amounts. We're in pretty good shape. Obviously our expenses were higher than budgeted due to the rejection of last year's budget, which we have had an excess in revenues, specifically the building and zoning, solar revenue, that I think it was about 275,000 over what we budgeted, which helped cover those additional contractual obligations such as payroll and debt services. So that was a help. Other departments such as detail revenue had budgeted over. Revenues came in higher than budget, I should say. So we were in good shape for the current fiscal year, and we had had a discussion. I think we mentioned at the Financial Town Assembly. I decided that I would send an email to department heads to freeze all non-essential spending, and that was done a couple weeks ago. Just because we will have some revenue shortfalls, such as recreation is probably the biggest one for the current year. a lot of programs obviously can't be held. So we are freezing all non-essential. And in my email to department heads, I addressed the fact that that's kind of a vague term and it might be a little confusing. So I elaborated a little bit, just basically saying, we don't want to stop operations. If stuff needs to get done, we don't want to shut down the town and stop spending altogether. But there are instances and specific line items where at the end of the year, people have, they'll plan during the year to kind of save some line items and some of their budget, such as like supplies, till the end of the year, and then they'll spend it before year end. So I made it clear to them that, don't spend things just because it's the end of the fiscal year and you have budget remaining. Please, be somewhat prudent and cautious, knowing that we do have a shortfall in some revenue. And everybody was very receptive. We've already seen the department heads react to that email, and I think they're doing a good job using their best judgment as far as not spending excessively on things that they don't necessarily need right now. So that kind of covers this year. Going forward, next year, it's, I've had many conversations with, the council members and Bill, and it's a very, very tricky situation. So to try to predict where we're going to be next year, 14 months from now, over the next 14 months, I mean, it's anybody's guess as good as mine. We don't really know when this thing's going to end and when things are going to get back on track, and how that rollout that the governor is doing with the phases is going to affect, economics and commerce. So it's very tricky thing to try to predict. And that's why, I think moving forward, the current budget that we have is a wise decision, because we don't really know anything other at this point, anything as far as state aid goes. So, hopefully, we'll get some assistance on the state level with the stimulus money that will trickle down to the towns, and we won't be affected too negatively from this whole thing. But it's a very tricky thing when we don't really have a time frame as to when things are going to be back to normal, and to what extent things will get back when they do recover. So I don't, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't. And I guess, we're open for discussion on any of these topics, but I don't know.
Yeah, so Brian, I know we had a discussion today. I just wanted to kind of frame things up for the council as well as anyone that's from the public on. We talked about, again, most recent, this fiscal year in 20, we're okay, but going forward in fiscal year 21, there's going to be some revenue shortfalls perhaps. And I know you talked about some of those. Maybe if you can just give a general sense of, worst case scenario from your end, and then best case scenario. Sure. I know the figures are about 430 and 260, something like that, but less in revenue based on what you're thinking as far as recreation, police, whatever else. And
sure.
So that'll kind of, help people to kind of put things in perspective going forward.
Sure. So, again, not really knowing, I had to come up with some numbers just, for my own comfort and also for the council's, general information, just give us a ballpark. I went through and analyzed all the revenue line items, which is where we're really being hit. It's more of a revenue shortfall than it is like additional expenses. We have FEMA covering a lot of our additional expenses. So really focusing on revenue. I know motor vehicle excise tax reimbursement, that phase out plan that it started 3 years ago. There's a lot of discussion amongst the cities and towns that they're going to level fund that, which would mean about $130,000 loss to the town of Hopkinton. And that's not confirmed, but that's just kind of the talk around town, so to speak. State aid to education, there hasn't been much talk on that. So that's, yeah, I didn't anticipate any loss in that revenue, but again, who knows? But meal, the beverage and meal tax that comes down from the state, we're anticipating about 73,000 there, which probably won't happen because there's substantial losses on the state level there. There's a couple other line items, recreation, we're anticipating about 131,000 in revenue there. So we can just, again, it's just a guess. I'm saying if the summer projects get canceled, which it's looking like, if we, worst case scenario, $100,000 loss there. I went through a few other line items, police detail, assumed we lost 50% of that. Again, this is kind of a worst case scenario. And it was about 450,000 when I added it all up. And, I hope that's not the case. But again, that's not to say that some stimulus money won't come in and offset that, which we're also, hoping that will happen. But just to give you a gauge, that's kind of where my guess was on a low side, or I guess a high side of
High side.
yeah. And then the other huge factor would be the collection rate. So that, we don't know at this point. We've been pretty steady with our collection rate historically, but we don't know. This is the first time we've ever seen anything like this. So, if collections don't come in, we could have a loss of revenue there as well. I think our tax sales really help that. The fact that we have a tax sale kind of ensures that we will get our taxes eventually, but there is potential for some revenue loss there as well. If people can't pay, they can't pay.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah, and and you said, I think on the low side, it was maybe what, 260 or something? 250
Yeah,
or something
I
like
would
that,
think, on a low side, yeah, I would think, I would say the motor vehicle excise tax of 130, the hotel and meal, say that's 63, you're at 193 there. They'll probably, and then, yeah.
Recreation.
Recreation. So, yeah. Again, it's tough to really kind of
Figure out.
throw a moving target here,
right.
but yeah, I think low side, that's what we're looking at, assuming we don't get any assistance.
Correct. Yep. And then as far as fund balance, Brian, just for the council's knowledge, what do we have in fund balance, I guess, at this point in time? And,
so we have currently we have going into fiscal year 20, which is this current fiscal year, we had 4.9 million, just under 5 million. And then we've earmarked $500,000 in our current fiscal year 20 budget, use of fund balance out of that.
Okay.
To offset.
Okay.
And in years past, we haven't had to use that whole lump sum because we've had additional tax revenue. But this year, it's looking like we probably will use at least a good portion of it.
Okay. So
it'll bring us down to 4.5.
Okay.
And then we're looking at like 61,000 in addition above the required minimum balance.
For the auditors.
Yeah, well, for everyone, Moody's, bond ratings, and the like. Yeah.
All right, so that's about we had talked, I think, at the last budget meeting about 58,000, so it's just a shade above that.
Yep.
And when we had our discussion today, also, you had mentioned there was some good news about, what was it? Tangible?
Motor vehicle.
A motor vehicle. Okay.
Yeah, motor vehicle is usually the last thing that the tax assessor, they have to go through and do like a manual process. And they have to deal with the other towns changing in registrations and whatnot. So that kind of, there's a little bit of a lag there.
Yeah.
She's updated those numbers and provided me and I get them continuously as the budget process goes on. The recent numbers that I got from her on Monday, there was an increase in the motor vehicle tax levy, which equated to 1 cent on the bill rate. So we'll be able to decrease it from 18.29 to 18.28.
Yeah. Okay.
And there was a couple other things that trickled in, like we got our final insurance rates. So I added those in. There was an increase of a couple $100 in property and casualty, a couple other minor adjustments here and there that still included in the budget, still resulted in that decrease of 1 cent on the mill rate.
Yep. Yeah, so that's good news. And then finally, is I know we talked about what's if we reduce or increase the budget, how much does it take for 1 penny on the mill rate?
It's about 10,000. It's just under 10,000
okay.
now.
All right. So that puts things in perspective for our purposes tonight. So if you know what we can and can't do, well, that's
And of course, an item like the rec department, she will have a dent in her revenue, but she will not have had the program, so she wouldn't have had the expense either.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, so sometimes it kind of works out. I know many of the others
It
don't.
balances.
Well, recreation is one that wouldn't. We take more revenue than expenses. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, she's a
So if
good
we
revenue stream.
Yeah, we'll definitely reduce the amount of payroll, part-time help. We'll reduce the program expenses, but the revenue exceeds the expense.
Well, but not when you include the employees. When you include the entire budget, the revenue does not meet the expenses. The total budget. Revenues meet
That's
the
correct.
expenses of each
Program.
T-ball or program. Yeah, different programs.
The
Yeah.
program
Right.
revenues exceed
Right.
the expenses.
To help
Correct.
pay for employees.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that's what I wanted Brian to kind of convey to the council and anyone else out there listening. Bill, do you have anything you want to chat in or chime in or? Oh, okay, all right. All right, so we'll just kind of continue on. I know Sharon at the last budget meeting, I believe, had asked perhaps, I think, about the tree account, right, Sharon? The
Yes.
restricted
Yes.
account for trees. Now, you're not here, but Bill had given us or whoever, Tim Teft had given Bill. It looks like the title of this memo dated May 11th is Dead Tree Update. So do you want, anyway, so that kind of explains it all, I guess. But for the benefit of the public and Sharon and Barbara who don't have this in their hand, I can read that, Sharon, if you'd like.
Yes.
Please, and
Okay.
then have Bill put it in our packet for Friday
Yeah.
as well.
Okay, all right. Says, hi, this is from Tim Teft, the DPW director. Hi, Bill. Here's an update on the dead tree situation in town. There's 3 bullet points at the top. The companies that have been hired by National Grid to remove trees on town roads, town property is reported to be approximately 225 dead trees. We also estimate that National Grid removed between 28 and 32 town trees that weren't on any list. I would estimate that the Public Works Department removed approximately 128 trees with our own truck and resources. We don't always count on all the trees that the Public Works Department remove. A lot of the trees that we remove aren't high on the National Grid list as dangerous. To explain that, a lot of the trees that we remove are from dead end roads. There may not be a lot of electricity customers on them. If a tree falls across the road and also takes out the wires, National Grid will get there, but not a top priority. The Public Works sees this as people being cut off from emergency services, and there's only one way in and out. So we want to avoid this, making them one of our priorities. Some of the roads there are remote areas without utility lines, where DPW has removed a large number of trees. DPW removed a large number of trees in these areas because we could cut them down without a risk of hitting wires. DPW does have a bucket truck, and we do remove trees with it, but we are not professionals without removing trees from wires. And for safety reasons, we don't cut them within 10 feet of the wires. The reason for hiring some tree removal companies are the proximity to wires, trees above the reach of our equipment, and the time we have available. We still have a list of approximately 95 trees that we will have to hire a company to remove. And they're also out there, but these are the worst trees and we have left right now. I know we're going to have someone come in the spring, but we couldn't because of the money situation. I contacted Randy Borders from National Grid Friday, and he said that they will occasionally have a crew around the area removing trees occasionally. However, I don't believe the amount of trees that they will be removing will be very substantial. I would then estimate that there's approximately 383 dead and/or dangerous trees removed. I would definitely like to set up with the tree company from the state to bid, and to do tree work for us after July, Tim. So anyway.
How many, so it's the 95 that he wants to still get done, right?
Yeah, that's what he's saying. We have a list of approximately 95 that we have to hire a company to remove. There are also more out there, but these are the worst trees we have right now. Yep. And I believe in that restricted account, Brian, it was about 72,000.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So I know
Do we
there
still
was
have 72?
yeah.
Do we still have 72,000 or did they spend it?
No, we have that.
Okay.
And I think, again, according, you guys can maybe correct me, but I think when we did the analysis last time, this money that we set aside was going to cut down, Bill, maybe 93 trees. So I think it's in the ballpark of what we have saved to do what we need to do as far as the emergency trees. So it seems like it's not going to require any more funding as far as I can tell. So hopefully that helps you as well. So,
Yeah,
The reason I'm asking,
go ahead,
Those
Barbara.
were
Frank, I'd like to speak. Frank, I'd like to speak.
Go ahead.
All right. When I'm looking at the fund balance summaries from fiscal year 19 and 20 and the townwide tree removal, it looks like we spent the 72,750 and we do not have a reserve left. I could be reading that wrong.
Yeah, that was, and I'm sorry if that caused confusion, because I believe you're not the only one that was, I put that in there, assuming that this was going to be spent by year end.
Okay, so it has not been.
Yeah, we have not spent that money, but when we had the department head meetings and Tim was in here, he said, when the National Grid was done cutting trees, we were going to use all that money to cut the remaining trees.
Sure.
So I kind of
Okay, that's good.
assuming that we were going to use all of that, but
It's still available.
currently it's available now. It's not spent yet. They haven't spent any of it.
It's not in deficit.
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon?
If that was what I was going to say,
Okay.
that it would appear that we can still use the 72,750. I talked to Brian this afternoon, so I did
Oh, good.
understand that it was not spent. They didn't spend anything this year, so we can use it. Thank you.
Yep. All right. I guess next up is discuss revised proposed warrant items. Number one, to restrict
Are we
the.
done with the budget?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
I don't have the
no, I'm just
agenda in
kind
front
of,
of me.
oh yeah, I'm just
okay.
going through the agenda. We'll obviously get to a bunch of other things, but so I just want to get through the warrant item. It says discuss revised proposed warrant item. Number one, to restrict the unspent balance of the salt and sand budget line item, number 5350-6000, and the overtime pay budget line item, number 4060-6000 in the 2019-2020 fiscal year Public Works Department budget to be placed into the legal fees restricted account. I know we've already discussed this and the reasoning why, and I think we're all.
Yeah, I have nothing to comment on that.
Yeah, Brian,
Neither
wants-
As far as I'm concerned, we've discussed it.
yeah, Brian just wants to chime in on it. please.
So I just wanted bring you up to speed. Currently, as of today, the overtime, there's 21,600 remaining in that account, and salt and sand is about 26,000. So that would be a transfer of, as of today, of just under 48,000. The overtime, obviously, they could incur more in the next couple of months, but it won't be substantial because, well, who knows? We don't know. But given this, winter's over, which is where they usually pick up a lot of that overtime.
Yep.
I don't see that
Happening.
coming down too much. So right now we're looking at 48, but it could be around 46 maybe by
All right. All right, so that's that. Yeah, I guess, and then any other budget-related items?
I have one.
Yeah, Sylvia, go ahead.
I would like to decrease the line item, increase the town clerk's revenue by $5,000. And that would come from the land trust. Instead of the land trust getting up to 15,000, they would get 10,000. That's what I'd like to suggest. I'm very disappointed that they didn't offer that themselves, given that they're getting so much revenue from projects, developmental projects for the next 30 years, So anyway, I'm just disappointed, given how many taxpayers are going to be suffering in our budgets, and so I'm just disappointed. But anyway, I'd like to take 5,000 out and give it to put it back in the town clerk's revenue.
Okay.
So do you need a motion?
Go ahead, Barbara. You have a question?
I have a comment because I would disagree with that. I think the Land Trust $2 million bond was voted on in 2007 by the people of Hopkinton to buy, preserve, and use forested and farmlands for public use and enjoyment. It did not include monies for upgrade, cleaning, trails, bridges, wildlife preservation, parking lots, maintenance, design, kiosks, seating, fishing docks, trail maps, GIS, records and administration, native artifacts, special needs, elderly and children areas, and educational spaces. The solar monies are the first substantial gifts for these activities from any outside source. Over the last 5 years, the total the town has given the Land Trust for these projects is $60,000. I think it's crucial that we open these lands safely to the public. The public bought the properties and deserve the use. The insurance, our trust, wants them open safely as well, and it all takes money. I think that they have been wise and frugal with their use of monies, but I think they have a great many projects to do to open the land as the people have been walking it during this entire pandemic. And I don't think we should take it. I think it's finally time when they have money to put into the construction of these projects that they have, and they have massive ones. And I think it's time that we did that. I do not think it's wise to take the 5,000 away from the Land Trust at this point. I think they have been patient, they have been frugal, and they have taken excellent care of the land, and they're trying very hard to open it to everyone so that they can use it. I think it's the wrong place to do it. We constantly, or we have in the past, is given the money and then taken it away, and given the money and taken it away. And they need to be able to work with something that is consistent and coherent. I think it's a major error.
I support Sylvia for a bunch of reasons. I think I've been a proponent of keeping this revenue at the clerk's office for some time now, especially since the solar projects have kicked in and given them a revenue stream for the next 20 to 25 years. Barbara, your comment on the bond vote, I voted for it back then, but it certainly didn't spell out the number on the amount of debt service that's involved when you have a bond like that, as far as acquiring the bond and the debt service like what's going into this year's budget of 170,000 of principal and interest. That was never spelled out to me when I voted for it. So I'm not going to support any more open bonds unless it's spelled out exactly what it's going to cost the taxpayers. So I think it was disingenuous. And again, this is not pointing fingers at anyone. It's just the referendums in and of themselves don't lead it to be very, very specific and spell out the cost to the taxpayers. So, and then, again, Sylvia was gracious enough to give the land trust some of the options to give some of the money back, even though they've got a steady stream of income now, and it fell on deaf ears. So, strike three for me. So anyway, Scott, do you have any questions on this?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Brian a question. A statement was just made about Councilman Hurst. I would like to ask the finance director, Mr. Rosso. It's my understanding from statements that have just been made about the debt service and, the referendum, which was geared toward the land trust, obviously. From a financial point of view, as I understand the facts, and correct me if I'm wrong, the land trust, the debt service obviously is a cost to the town. So, I mean, which goes to benefit the land trust as it is. So they're still getting a significant amount of money, even though it might go to debt service.
Yeah, so the way the bonds are structured is they can only use it for the land purchases, but they voted, and I can't remember, actually, I'm sure the council, members of the council remember, or Bill, the date. It was approved, I want to say, back in like 2013 or 2014. There was a vote, and the voters approved a $2 million bond to purchase open space. So it was structured, it was specific that that money had to be spent on the purchase of land. Once that bond was spent, yeah, the town, it goes into the town budget. So it goes into debt services, and the taxpayers end up paying for the principal and interest on that bond.
But it still goes to strictly, mostly benefit the activities of the land trust. It doesn't go for any other.
No, it's paying a bank back. It's a
Well, it's
loan.
paying the bank back, but it's still money that the town of Hopkins has to appropriate that benefits the land trust.
Yeah.
Correct. To
If you
purchase.
take
It benefits the public. It benefits the public, not the land trust. The public buys the land. What the land trust does is then also try to open that land and develop that land so it can be used safely by the public. That money was not given to them. And that's the money they save for, and they work for, and they find grants for, and they work their little tushes off for. The money that the bond is only for buying the land, and that is buying public land for the public. It is not for the benefit of the land trust. It's the benefit of the public and the town of Hopkinton. And that was a good thing when it happened, whether you recognized that it has interest attached to it. Most people would recognize that that is something that happens eventually. And they waited this long. They have spent years developing that land and finding the land and working with other people to buy the land so that they're not buying it 100%. They're getting the land, Nature Conservancy or Audubon to put money into this as well. They have been fabulous stewards with this money. And if you have a bond, you assume you're going to have to pay interest.
Again, it was never spelled out when the vote took place what it was actually going to cost the taxpayers. That's my issue. Again, if you're going to support something as large as that, it needs to be spelled out financially what it's going to cost the taxpayers, and it never did. So,
But Frank, if I buy a house, I know that my house is going to be 3 times what I buy it for. If I spend 20 years paying for it, I have to pay interest.
it still doesn't matter because again, if it's disclosed properly,
Common sense.
then no. Again, if it's disclosed properly and not just has a spin on it for open space, who doesn't like open space? That's the spin that was put on it. It's open space. That's great. Everybody wants open space, but what does it cost? That wasn't spelled out. That's my issue. And I wouldn't have voted for it if I knew what it costs. That's plain and simple. I wouldn't have. That's all we got down here is open space.
Well, let me say, when I was on the council that created the land trust and I voted for it. And I did talk to Marilyn Grant just before the meeting tonight. And I usually support the land trust, but I think the land trust, compared to other land trusts and other surrounding towns, does very well from as far as support from local government. I could ask if Lisa, it does get returned to the town clerk's budget, what would the town clerk office plan to do with that money? Which I think would be a fair question.
At this point, it would either.
All
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
revenue that we take in is distributed either by the state departments that have to get their share of the revenue. So that comes out of that, but everything else gets deposited into the general fund,
So
with the exception of a couple of restricted accounts. But, you know, the majority of it goes to the general fund. I don't get to spend that money per se.
yeah. So
No,
she's absolutely right. Like, so that 5,000 right now, if we increase that revenue line item, it would either be a reduction in the mill rate or
Right.
a reduction in the use of fund balance. And that would be a council decision.
Right. And that could
Well, how you-
lower the tax rate to half a penny. If we add more to it, it'll only add to the reduction in the tax rate. So we haven't gotten to that discussion yet, but
no,
It wouldn't affect her department.
right.
It all goes back into all the revenue gets collected into the general fund.
So what are your thoughts, Scott?
So anyway, I would like to just add that I don't think, I haven't heard anyone dispute that the land trust and on all its volunteers and the friends, they do a great job. Nobody disputes that. The issue is they're receiving $20,000 for the next 30 years, every single year from one
For operating
project.
costs.
And that's why we asked if they could we're not taking all of it. We just want to get it down to 10,000 instead of them receiving 15. It's 10. That's all. That's all.
And they
So,
got
anyway.
Yeah, and they got a one-time donation from a Skunk Hill project of 10,000, so.
And they get land and they get parking areas.
Right,
And I mean, they
right.
negotiate with projects too, and they do a good job. So anyway, I'd like to see us remove that money and put it back into the town clerk's budget. So I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me. Isn't it best to do, if we make a change, it's a vote?
Yeah, it's a consensus.
Okay, I move that we, because this is a special, okay. I move that we remove 5,000 from the land trust and return it to the town clerk's budget as a revenue item that goes into the general fund, and that the land trust now receive 10,000 instead of 15. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, and all those supporting that, Sylvia's motion signify by saying aye.
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 That's 4. Do we have,
Aye. Yeah, this is Sharon. I voted aye.
okay.
I think Barb might not.
Barbara, you out there?
Yes, I am. I'm waiting for you to ask for the nays.
Oh, okay, nays.
Aye. It's a nay. It's a no.
All right, okay. So the motion passes 4-1. Thank you. And I know, I actually, let me see. Marilyn?
Hello, yes.
Yeah,
You got it
sorry.
right.
Sorry.
I asked 3 times.
Yep.
All right, well, I appreciate the fact that the $5,000, if you are removing it, is not going to the town council, because that's like a huge increase for the town council, and it turns out to be a 14% decrease in our budget. The $5,000 represents 0.02% of the town budget. 0.02% is $5,000. I guess based on Brian's discussion, that would be half a penny on the mill rate. Am I right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. But a 14% decrease for us and a full 33% decrease on what the town is offering us. As far as the $20,000 that we get from a solar project, that I just would like to correct you, that is for 25 years.
25.
And it involved some negotiations that we undertook so that, because we owned a right-of-way on the property and it allowed the solar people to develop it further. But we have a parking lot and a trail here. There are no other benefits from any other projects that I am aware of. $20,000 a year is excellent. And imagine if we didn't have that, we'd be asking you for more. The $10,000 one-time donation last year allowed us to spend $30,000 on a parking lot. And we have since contracted with someone to spend another $4,500 to $5,000 for finishing the area around the parking lot and developing safety, along the road so that people coming in and out of the parking lot can see and be safe coming in and out. We have an area of a trail in Kenyon Crossroads that we were informed about 2 years ago that it needs work, and we have not been able to do that yet. Our Depot Square project, where the approval of the permits is pending, and we've received estimates of the cost for that, which will be covered by a $100,000 grant. However, it appears that we may end up $20,000 short on that one. So anything that you can provide for our operating will be used wisely. I can assure you of that.
Well, it sounds like, Marilyn, this is Frank, that you're keeping 10,000, just not 15. So that's what we've decided. And just so you know, since we're on the topic of mill rates and half pennies and all that stuff, the debt service and related cost for the land trust debt service is about 19 cents to the taxpayers. So it's significant, and we needed some room to help out with the revenue projections that we're going to probably have a need for next fiscal year. So that's why we decided to do it. So,
well, the debt service, it's unfortunate that it cropped up in this particular year, but it's spread out over a great deal of time, and like I say, it's unfortunate that it hit the budget this year.
Well, it's actually two parts of it hit the budget this year. I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, last year we had maybe just interest-only payments, which was a little easier. Now we've got principal and interest, so it's that's why it's so high. It's $175,000. So.
Well, yes, and no, the only thing was that budget got rejected.
Correct.
So originally we had just the interest in the budget,
right.
But it got rejected. So therefore the increase this year is
The principal
additional
portion.
Principal and
Right,
interest,
and interest,
because
right.
we didn't end up getting the interest in last year's budget.
Right. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Marilyn.
All right. I'm sorry I didn't get to discuss this before you took the vote.
Okay.
Actually, that should have been at the hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, the hearing on the budget.
Yeah.
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 So.
All right. All right. So I guess we dealt with the warrant items. I guess any other budget-related items that anyone from the council wants to chat about?
I still want to chat about the increase for the town councilors.
Okay.
I think that if we haven't had a raise in 15 years, and even then, at that point, it was reduced from before that. I think that it is worth spending the money.
Yep.
And it is only, like you said, a half a cent on the mill rate. And I think that the council is handling a lot more work than it has had in the past with all of the solar projects. And I think if somebody hasn't had a raise in 15 years, I think there shouldn't be too much of a reason to deny that. So that's,
Well, yeah, and
I
again,
make,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just to point out too, Sharon, this will be for the next council. Anything that's voted on, it doesn't affect this current council, but anyone who runs and gets elected next this November, I guess. So.
correct. So I make a motion that we increase the town council budget by $5,000 for this new fiscal year.
For stipends, right?
It begins in November with the election.
For stipends, correct?
Correct.
Yep, okay. All right, so we have a motion. Do I have a second on that?
For purposes of discussion, I'll second.
Okay, Scott, for purposes of discussion, seconded the motion. Yes, Sylvia?
This is Sylvia Thompson. Sharon, there was a time, and I was on the council, and this was normal, that we didn't have a planning board that dealt with projects. We didn't have a town manager. The town's council, we at that time ran the town. You were the auditor, you were the planning board, you were the town manager, you did it all. So I disagree that we've been overworked. Now, obviously, this year or the past 2 years was unusual with all the solar hearings, okay? But I would like to point out that in 2006, this is the salary, the same salary, the bottom line total amount is what the council received in 2006. And I have said it before, and I'll say it again, it was certainly too high back then. I think it's right on the money now compared to cities and towns around us, and I'm in rural towns of a similar size. So we're not overly. I think it's right. Now I understand Frank's point of view, because as council president, he's been, and he really does. He attends as many meetings as possible. He goes out of his way to do that. It's his work ethic that he does more than council presidents have done in the past. Individual counselors at times do a lot of work, and then other times they do nothing other than attend meetings and make decisions. So, I mean, it varies. It depends on what's going on with the projects before, what issues are before the town at the time. So I think the amount of money that we receive now is perfectly fine. And I guess I disagree that we need to change it at all. And if it ever gets changed, this is not the year to do it, with everyone suffering and out of work. This is absolutely not the right time to do it. Another time, bring it up. I'll still be opposed to it, but that's my feeling.
Okay.
I have a comment, Frank.
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, I have to say I also must agree. Our council stipends are completely within and commensurate with other rural towns of our size. Giving ourselves a 33% raise is untenable, unnecessary, and I believe hypocritical. We do not work harder than other towns, other commissions, or other councils. The arrogance that we are superior in our work ethic is ludicrous and truly embarrassing. This is a public service, not a public trough. We work for people because we love this town. That's why we run for office. That's what we expect. We are not here to become CEOs of major companies. I know you would like a raise. We have all found that it is perfectly acceptable to work for the good of the people with a very basic stipend. But since we are also commensurate with all of the rural towns around us with the same populace, I think this is totally unnecessary. And I certainly agree with Sylvia that this is the wrong year to do this, if there's ever a good year to do it.
Scott?
Thank you.
Well, I've been interested in politics since I was a child, and I do think the Hopkinton Town Council does deserve a raise. I will be voting against this motion, but I do commend Councilor Davis. The political reality is we'll probably have more than 5 people in this coming election. The last election, we only had 5. And I believe that the council should receive more money. The issue before us is that some people can afford to serve because they're comfortable enough to serve. Other people take time out from their pursuits to serve. The situation is, I don't have the statistics in front of me what other cities and towns make, but the fact of the matter is that I get 2,500, comes in handy. It doesn't cover my town property taxes, but it's very helpful. But being on a town council is a commitment, and it's a serious thing because you're in charge of a town, in Hopkinton's case, of over 8,000 people. Some people can easily give time. It's very tough to recruit people to run for office because people are really busy. And I know because I'm the head of the Republican Party in this town. So I commend Councilor Davis. I vote against the motion, but we have to address this situation because I remember a number of years ago, the town of Richmond, between both the Democrats and Republicans, didn't have 5 people to run for town council, and some people ended up getting elected as write-ins. The town council is so important is because it's the focal point of a town. And we don't even have people to serve on non-paying jobs. And in powerful boards like the planning board, we now have 2 alternate positions, and we have other positions. So that I believe that the council should get a raise, but I will vote against this. But in the future, there's something that we really have to go for. And I commend Councilor Davis for taking a stand on a losing battle today, but it's something that needs to be considered in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've always been in favor of a little bit more money for the council. If you put the time in, you make decisions that benefit the town on a revenue side, as we've done the last couple of years. It's certainly warranted. That's just my feeling with the industry that I'm in. That's how I'm rewarded. And so I think that way. So, but again, I don't want to increase the tax rate to give the council a raise either. So my thoughts were we would transfer perhaps the land trust money to the council, but if it's staying with the town clerk's revenue, tax stamp revenue, then again, I don't want to increase anything.
Well,
you know.
But Frank, if that money is really just going to the general fund, it still could be used for this stipend, number one. Number two, Charlestown is getting $18,000 a year. And number three, in 2012, what we're getting now is $12,175.
Right.
That was what we were making in 2012. In 2005, we were actually making $12,275. And so they reduced the stipend by $100 in fiscal year 12. But I'm still saying that I think that the council is working. I think that if you haven't had a raise in 15 years, I think that it's not being unreasonable. And number 4 or 5, whichever way I am at this point, if that money was if the money that we just reduced the land trust by is just going to go into the general coffers, it could have been, it could be used for the stipends. That's my point.
Yep. No, valid point, Sharon. Looks like we'll probably, again, I've always been in favor of doing this to some degree. And I told you I'd support you on this measure, and I will. Again, I just didn't want to have the tax rate go up because of it. So I want that to be known for sure. So, but I guess we'll have a quick consensus vote. And
one
yeah,
last
go ahead,
thing.
Sylvia,
Sharon, you mentioned that Charlestown's getting 18,000.
Correct.
And they, in fiscal year, let's see, in fiscal year
19, they got 15.5.
excuse me, could I just finish?
Yep.
In fiscal year 13, they were getting 13,000. In 14, they were getting 13,000. In 15, they were getting 13,000. And the 13,000 that they received, which is just over our 12,175. And by the way, when it says 12,175, that's divided amongst 5 people.
5 people.
We don't all get
Correct.
12,000.
No, right.
Just so
Correct.
just so people know at home. In fiscal year 19, they increased it to 15,500, and then in fiscal year 20, it got increased to 18,000. So that's where the 18 comes. But anyway, over in Richmond, they're only getting $6,500 divided by 5 people. So
Yes, but they've had that for 20 years, and if they can be happy with that, that's fine with them.
Sharon, take it easy. Sharon, take it easy.
Hold on.
Tell you what, maybe I'll do act like ham radio, and yeah, and I'll just say over. Go.
All right, Sharon, you have anything else?
Well, I'm just saying, I talked to Joe Redding Friday when I was in the grocery store, and he said he's from Richmond. He said he supported what I asked for and said that Richmond had not had an increase in 20 years. So just because somebody else didn't have an increase, why shouldn't we?
Oh, no, that's a valid point. Now, who did you run into, Sharon? I didn't quite catch that.
Joe Reddish, he was on the Richmond
Yes.
Town Council in the past, was
Yes.
president in the past.
Yep. I know Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. All right. I guess, do we have want to just quickly have a consensus vote on it?
Well, there was a motion in a second.
Okay, there was. Okay. Motion was made and seconded to,
Frank, one more second though.
yep, go ahead.
Would it make a difference if I added that money came out of the general fund that that the town clerk was going to get?
Well, you'd have to appeal to Sylvia, Barbara, or Scott.
It's unnecessary, Sharon.
You know,
If you want to increase this by whatever amount, then that's your motion. You don't have to say where it's coming from. Obviously, it'll just come from the fund balance amount.
right.
It's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
All
I
right.
just wanted you to know that I wouldn't be increasing the budget. We would just be moving it around, especially since we already voted to keep 5,000
Yep.
from the Hopkinton Land Trust.
Yep.
I just wanted to make that point.
Yep.
Okay.
Good point. All right, so we have a motion made and seconded to not, I guess the motion was to not allocate another 5,000 to the town council. Motion was seconded.
I think.
No, that wasn't the motion.
Sharon
I'm
made the
sorry.
motion.
I'm sorry, Sharon. It was to add 5,000 and Scott seconded for discussion purposes. Okay. All right, so those in favor of Sharon's motion to add 5 to the council stipends signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those not in favor say no.
No,
No.
Okay, so the motion fails.
I might be
Okay,
open.
moving on, Frank.
Hold on one second, Scott's talking.
I'd be willing to consider another amount of, but the times are tough and, but this is an issue that has to be addressed. And public service is not easily affordable to everybody because a lot of people don't have free time. And you don't serve in office to make money, but there should be some for your expenses. For many years, Rhode Island General Assembly got, I think it was $10 a day, no, $5 a day and 8 cents a mile. And that was for like 100 years, and they finally changed it. They got out of the state constitution. But it's a consideration to people to serve. So this is something that has to be revisited. So unless somebody has another amount, I'm not going to propose another amount at this time. Thank you.
Okay, there's one hand up here. I'm going to unmute. Phone number ending
Hi,
in
Frank.
Hi.
Frank, this is Cynthia Johnson.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Hi to everybody there. I just want to, I called for 2 reasons. One, this was one of the reasons. The second was obviously the land trust. The land trust is a done deal. This is a done deal, but I want to take a second to thank Sylvia and Barbara for her comments on both issues under thoughtful consideration. And I must say that I am not in favor of a raise overall. I think public service is public service. But in this time of COVID-19, when many people in our town are just struggling financially, they don't have their jobs anymore, I think it's just unconscionable to even ask for that much money to have an increase in your stipend, although I do appreciate all that everyone does. So just thank you to Sylvia, to Barbara, and to for the thoughtful consideration that you've all given it. And I'm really glad that it is not going on. That's it. Thanks, Frank.
Okay, Cindy, yeah, just so you know too, it's not for this particular council, it's for the next council, right? You know that, right?
No, oh, I know, and it's nothing personal either. I just in general, I know it's for the next council, and I just think it's the right move to make.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For your comments, yep, thank you. Okay. All right, any other budgetary items? Hello?
Hello.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello?
They hit the wrong button again?
Hold on, Barbara.
Okay.
Yep. Sharon, what's your phone number, please?
I'm here. It's 491-9437.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, any other budgetary items to discuss? Anyone?
Well, all I can
Scott?
say,
Scott Billhurst?
all I can say is that I would hope that my council colleagues would at least consider putting in $50 or $100 for the director of public
Oh,
welfare.
that's right, yeah.
It's a very small point. I know a lot of people tend to oppose that, but it is an elected town office in the town. And hopefully we can recruit somebody that will actually do at least a minimum for that position. I don't buy the people who argue that that position is, we have organizations that do those type of things. That's an office of the town government of Hopkinton and Rhode Island, and they coordinate things to better that area. So I think that at least some respect should be given to that office, even if it's a token amount of $50 or $100. So
I'll move that we add $50 to the public works. I mean, the public, excuse me.
Public Works has enough money.
Public Works doesn't need that $50 public welfare account.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Council discussion.
It's Barbara.
Yes.
I personally still think that that's a foolish thing to do. We do not use that position. We pay through our CDBG. We take care of Johnny Cake Center and the Wood River Health. We take care of people all the time, and there are ways that they need to be handled, and they need to be handled with privacy. And there are plenty of regulations that need to be followed now, and you cannot just put someone in town and say, oh, hi, I'm going to organize this, because one, they don't, and two, they haven't for years now. It is a position that is no longer of value to the town. We no longer have someone who measures our walls and walks the walls, nor do we have people that weigh the flour and goods to make sure that the weights are correct. I don't think it's necessary, and it's not necessary because it's finally an anomaly, and we need to move forward into the 21st century, and I think that's something that we should not deal with, because he brings it up every time he can. And it has been a non-used position for easily a decade. That's all.
Sharon, Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I will go along with Barbara on this. I don't think it's necessary. You haven't used it in the last at least 4 years. I don't think you need to do it. I think it needs to be eliminated.
All right. Scott Billhurst is on the floor.
Well, let me say frankly, I think some of the discussion is foolish myself. Number one, it's an elected town office of the town of Hopkinton, which has existed for many years. It's in the town charter. Maybe you've heard of the town charter. I have. And also, I think it's important to realize that's an elected position, and people can be elected, and people do get write-in votes for it, whether they accept or not. The Director of Public Welfare is an elected official of the town of Hopkinton, and all these other programs or organizations, no matter how commendable they are, they're not part of the town government of Hopkinton, Rhode Island. And I think respect for that office, whether it should be eliminated is not the point. The point is, it's an elected part of town government, exists, and it should be recognized as such. Thank you.
Okay. I would certainly support my fellow colleague Scott Bill Hurst on this. It's in the charter. It's an elected position and it needs to be funded. So I don't think $50 one way or the other is going to make or break the town of Hopkinton. So I would go along with his request. Sylvia, you made the motion. Scott seconded. We'll take a quick vote on.
I have one more comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Can I make one more comment? Yeah, thank you. The other issue with putting in a position that's an anomaly is that if you pay that position and you pay that person and you have a person in that position that's paid, we're covering their insurance too, you know, so that if they do anything wrong or have a problem and they were doing town business, we're liable for them. So for $50, you're still liable for anything that they do. Or anything they give that's incorrect, or any information they give that's incorrect, or any privacy that they breach. We're liable. It's an anomaly of an area. The people that we do use, the warm shelter and Johnny Cake Center, these people know exactly what to do, and they do it correctly and well. And South County Community Action and Wood River Health, they do things in the correct manner and pattern so that they are covered by their insurance and they are taking care of people in a correct and reasoned and studied way. This is a position that deals with, you know, children and fostering and all kinds of mental health issues that they are not qualified for. Not any longer. They may have been at one time, but not any longer. It is a position that needs to go away. And yes, it's in the charter, and it means we need to remove it. It is a risk, and it's an unnecessary risk.
Well, again,
And so I am simply not going to put someone out there who can make mistakes and actually injure people. Not only is the town injured because we have to cover the insurance, but they could actually injure someone by saying the wrong thing or sending them the wrong space or telling someone private information that they shouldn't.
again,
It is an important position to do social work. It is not something that you just get elected to and, oh my goodness, you're perfect at it. You can give them a can of beans. That's not the way it works anymore. It used to. It just isn't anymore. Anyway, that's
again,
my
that's
point
a
of view.
that's a sky is falling attitude. I think it's you're stretching on that one, Barbara, in terms of liability. All these folks are is advocates for the public, and that they try and help people. You know, so I don't buy any of that you said. So I don't know if Scott has any other questions, but that's
All
a
I know
complete
is I
stretch.
think a lot of stuff that Councilor Capalbo was saying is absurd, and I won't even respond to it. Thank you.
All right. So anyway, for $50, and it's again, if you feel so strongly, I would suggest you work on getting it out of the town charter or whatever the process is. Talk with legal and find out how you remove it. Because I have the same discussion every year about this position, and no one seems to. At least the people that don't want it don't make any moves to get it removed either. So
Frank, there is a charter commission that exists, but we can't get 5 or 6 people to get on that commission to be able to do the work, to get rid of
Correct.
it. Again, I would
So
imagine.
do not say we are not attempting it.
Well, I would imagine the town council has the authority to amend that. I don't think you need a commission, but
Don't think so, not on the charter, not on the
Yeah.
charter.
not sure.
It has to go through the commission, then it goes to the council.
Well, recruit
Correct.
some members
No,
then.
it's-
Recruit some members. Anyway,
Thank you, Frank.
anything else?
All I can say is that Hopkins is not the only town that has that position or a similar position, and that's all I'm going to say. I'm not even going to argue, because I've thought a lot about this, and I'm not, it's,
Should we vote on it?
I got the vote, so that's all I care about in Sharon and Barbara Van a losing side this time. So I won some and I lost some, but looks like I'm going to win this one. Thank you.
Yes, Sylvia.
I haven't heard anything to disagree with, and but it is in the charter, and for now, until the charter gets changed, it is in the charter, so I don't have a problem putting $50 in.
Okay, and again, I would support Scott. I've always mentioned this at our budget meetings throughout my 10 years. It's come up, and I said I would support him, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, it's a small amount of money to keep that funded, so, or to actually fund it. So, so we have a motion made and seconded, I believe. All those in favor of keeping the or funding the public welfare office by $50 signify by saying yes.
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 Yes. All those not in favor, say no.
No,
No,
no.
Okay, motion carries. All right, congratulations, Mr. Hurst.
Thank you.
Finally got it on the books, okay. Anything else? Sharon, Barbara, anything else on the budget you guys have questions on, concerns?
No.
no.
Okay, Scott?
I would like to say that I'd like to publicly thank Sylvia and Thompson and Frank Landolfi, our council president, for supporting me on this director of public welfare thing. It's a political victory for me, but it's something a recognition for the office that I think is deserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, anything else from Lisa, Brian, Bill? You guys have any other tidbits you want to? Oh, the only other thing I wanted to talk about, I guess we can kick it around, is I know we had some discussion. We had, I think, about 58 to 61,000 in fund balance that we could perhaps, if we were so inclined, to maybe pay down the mill rate or keep it there. The mill rate as it stands now, I think, is 1828 right now. So we can decide tonight to either further reduce that by about 6 cents, or we can leave it there in hopes that our revenues aren't as low as as we've been predicting, as a little bit more of a cushion. So it's not, I don't think one way or the other it would break us, but it's just something I wanted to have the council discuss.
This is Sylvia. I was originally in favor of taking every dollar we could from the fund balance. There's so little left. I mean, a minor amount. And given that our revenues are going to be down, we just don't know by how much. I think we just ought to leave it alone. Seems safer to just leave it alone.
I would have to agree, because we really don't yet know what the transportation aid and the housing aid is from the state, or if they're going to take that away as well from the school budget side. And that would be a little deadly for all of us.
Scott, do you have a comment?
No.
No, okay. Sharon, did you comment? I can't remember.
No, I didn't. I agree with Sylvia and Barbara at this point.
Okay. All right. So it looks like right now we're at 1828, I guess, on the mill rate. So that's that. Okay, I do have to agree with the uncharted territory we're in terms of revenue for next fiscal year. Who knows what's going to happen? It'll certainly come in handy, I guess, if some of the projections that Brian had indicated earlier come to fruition. We'll probably need that money. So, and the mill rate's been reduced quite a bit from 2068 to 1828. So it's quite a drop. So that's that. Okay.
So can I make a motion that the fiscal year 2021 tax levy should be $19,093,505?
No, that's not the way to go.
No,
Because
hold on.
everything's, the assessments, things are fluid until the very end. So what we want to do is just adopt the budget and then adopt the resolutions or the warrant item.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
just adopt the budget.
Okay,
So
All
I'll
right.
move that we adopt the
I
budget.
make a second.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat your motion?
I move that we adopt the fiscal year 2021 budget as presented
And
tonight.
warrant items.
And warrant
that-
item?
Do them separately.
We'll do those separately.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
Did we have a second?
Second that.
I second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous, 5-0. All right, then, motion on the warrant.
Move that we approve the warrant item.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion on the warrant items? Hold on, Brian's looking at me.
Well, the only thing I was going to say was the motor vehicle tax changes that weren't incorporated in the budget that you guys are reviewing tonight. Do we need approval for me to make those changes as well?
Oh, it's a fluid, yes.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
I can make those.
Yeah, you
changes,
can make
right,
those
all right.
changes.
Oh, of
Brian.
course.
Yes,
Right,
yeah.
so it actually, like we said. it would
1828.
reduce- Yeah,
Yeah.
1828.
Yeah, right, right. Okay, so we had a motion made and seconded, right, Lisa, on the warrant?
Yeah, yeah.
Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous, 5-0, okay. All right, I think that's.
Now, are there
yeah.
any resolutions that we need to adopt tonight, Lisa?
No, your resolutions, once the budget is adopted, will go on your town council agenda for your second meeting in June, which would be the 15th of June.
Okay.
Say that again, Lisa?
Any other warrant items, usually the resolutions after the budget is approved, you discuss and consider resolutions.
Okay,
They will, at the town council meeting, the second town council meeting of the month in June.
okay, all right, all right.
So
And-
Lisa?
Yeah.
So how is this June 9th thing going to happen, the budget referendum ballot? How's that going to happen?
That is a good question.
Yeah,
We have to try to move forward with what we know now, and what we know now is that we have a charter that requires us to have a budget referendum, and until such time as something else comes up and we are allowed to adopt a budget in another way, we can only go forward with what we know.
there'll be,
Good. So we have a budget referendum on the 9th of June at this point,
At this
an
point,
all-day
yes.
budget. That's
At the
good. Thank
town
you.
hall?
so just.
I'm
just-
sorry?
Go ahead.
Is it at the town hall?
That's typically where it is. The hours would be 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., but I am not in the business of predicting the future, so I do not know what will happen. But that's what we have to go with at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just so everyone knows, I've been in talks with Bill and Kevin, and we're going to have it on the agenda for a more detailed discussion on Monday night for, as far as the referendums. So, yeah, stay tuned, more to come on that, okay? We've got one hand up here. It looks like, is that Joe Morrow? Joe?
Good evening. Good evening. This is Joe Moreau. I hope everyone's staying safe. I just want to comment on this discussion about the social worker, and it's been dormant for 10 years. My son-in-law is a social worker. He has his master's degree, and he works for the VA. And I know how hard he works to save families and to save people. You look at the COVID-19, how many people have come out of retirement, nurses and doctors, to help people when they're in need. Just because we haven't had something for 10 years, there could be someone that is a qualified social worker that would do it just to help people. And I think that's what we need to really consider, is it's a position to help people. I know a couple of people now that are struggling. And just to give you an idea, there was one person that I've been trying to help. and she was fortunate enough to have donations from some of the different facilities that were talked about tonight. And this person had called me. She had 9 loaves of bread that was delivered to her, and she told the social worker who was delivering, she said, I just can't use this bread. I mean, I'm a single person. I've got 9 loaves of bread. And she was told, well, just throw it away. You know, so we need to look for avenues to really help people and help them in the right directions and give them some directions, because that is a real serious concern I have, is about helping our residents, that are, especially now with this COVID-19. So that's all I'd like to say. But I do want to thank everyone for, again, for their efforts with this budget. It's a very difficult time, and you guys did a great job with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Historically, the Director of Public Welfare is not a professional position. Basically, they're a resource people. They direct people to avenues where people can get help on certain things. I know sometimes, I know one of the previous ones, I believe she helped pass out Thanksgiving baskets. It's not a high-level position or a credential position. It's an elected office. I think in the town of Gloucester, they call it Human Resources Director, which is an elected, if I remember correctly. It's not a professional position. It's an elected position with no qualifications other than to be a voter. But I think the office should be respected, and but it's not a technical position, and they don't get it. As far as I know, we're over the top of what the position really is. But we've had some people, I know there's 4 people living that I can name off the top of my head that have had that position and actually did something with it in Hopkinton. So that's the deal. So with that, I won't say any more, but it's, and anybody that's listening, anybody that needs help right now, I mean, United Way 211 is a very good number, is a good resource for people to, but the Director of Public Welfare is not a professional position that gets into all this heavy duty stuff that's been discussed tonight. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I guess anything else from
Yeah, we
anyone?
do. I believe that we had a motion in the beginning of the meeting about talking about the school thing, which we haven't talked about.
Okay. I did hear back from Kevin, and he said we can't vote on that particular item under the OMA. So it will be on Monday's agenda.
Yeah.
We can.
So what I was hoping for
Yeah.
tonight is that we would at least get a consensus. And the reason I know it'll be on the agenda, whether or not we have a vote on the Charahoe budget. It will be discussed Monday night. My concern is whether or not any information has gone to the governor to ask her to circumvent that and just allow the budget to exist and there's no vote. So I'm concerned about that. So the bottom line is, if we can get a consensus that we agree that it's a fundamental right, it's in the Constitution, a right to vote. You can't just decide that you don't have an election on the Charahoe budget. As a matter of fact, I've got the charter here, and one of the things that, and I understand it's a very difficult position for the school committee to be in. I don't discount that. But within 30 days after the school committee adopts its final budget, and I'm reading this from the Charahoe Act, within 30 days after the school committee adopts its final proposed budget for the ensuing year, a budget approval referendum must be held in each of the member towns. So that hasn't happened. And it goes on to say on the same page, If a budget is not adopted by the regional school committee and approved by the voters before July 1 of each year, then the school committee shall operate the regional school district in accordance with the provisions of 16-223, the general laws. And the member towns must make payments to the school district based upon the amounts appropriated for support of the schools by the member towns in the preceding year. So if they don't allow the voters to vote on this budget, and if the voters in the school committee don't agree to adopt a budget by July 1, they will be required to use their previous year's budget. And as we know, of course, if that happens, contractual items, they have to meet contractual items, but in other areas, they would have to adhere to last year's budget. So we want to, if we have a consensus of the council, I would want the council president to make sure that he is in touch with the governor's office, to make sure they know that on Monday night, we will be discussing this item. And so far, we are not in favor of taking away the voters' rights. So that's where I'm coming from. So I just want to
I
hear
have a comment.
consensus from everybody if we like that.
Yep. Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
My comment is that I listened to the school board meeting yesterday. There was no vote. There was a discussion about an executive order. There was no vote, and the school board did not approve anything like that we would not have a budget referendum. The only resolution passed last night was the urging the continued appropriation of state and local revenues to support public education, which is basically making sure that the transportation aid and housing aid doesn't go away. The school board did not act on any resolution about not having a budget referendum. As far as they knew, Charleston Elementary School would be having one. It would be at their location, and Richmond has it at the town hall for a town financial meeting, and that we would, of course, have our budget meeting. That is what they discussed, along with what happens if it fails, because they would have to go back to the prior year's budget. But under no circumstance did they pass or vote for a resolution saying there would not be a budget referendum in each of the towns.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
The budget that we're going to be having a referendum on is the town's budget on June 9th, correct?
Right.
But all of the towns did not vote on Charahoe's budget. Am I right?
Right.
So how can we
Correct.
even vote on our own budget if we don't know what Charahoe's budget's going to be? I think Charahoe has to have a vote before the town has a vote.
Lisa,
It makes no sense to me.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Lisa, when do they typically have their referendum?
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
When? No, the Charo referendum? vote?
Tuesday, the second
The
Tuesday.
Terre budget referendum
Yeah.
was supposed to be in April.
Correct.
Oh, they never had it.
Right.
It was
They
canceled.
passed the budget they passed the budget 3/18. It should have been by 4/18.
Mhm.
That is correct.
All right.
So I don't think
So we-
that our town should be voting on a budget that includes Charahoe when we haven't even voted on the Charahoe budget. We don't even know what we're voting on.
True.
We are in a predicament.
Yes, we are.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
need to
The
communicate.
pandemic is brand new. But I assume we're going to be talking about this in more detail on Monday,
Yes.
because maybe we'll have some other answers. But indeed, we all know that we all want to do a budget referendum, and
Yeah. And so again,
we're not passing that.
I've been in touch with Bill and Kevin on this, and we're going to have a more detailed discussion on Monday night about it. So everybody hopefully will gain some more insight, specifically, because I know I was on the conference call for the school committee, and I know they talked about different options up to and including, having the school committee approve it, which I know they can't, but without a vote. I'm not sure, how, I know that was discussed, but obviously not voted on, but it just, I think that's what makes people nervous when some of those ideas are floated around and they're in uncharted territory and they're perhaps illegal.
So is there a consensus? I'd like to know if there's a consensus among the counselors that, oh, of course, I'd like to hear from everybody and know whether or not we agree we have to have a referendum. That's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So that we
We
can,
have to have a Charahoe referendum.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I think, yes. Yes. And that's not a vote, but that's.
I would,
No, it's not a vote. Just
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I would agree with Sylvia.
Okay. And Scott, you have the floor.
Tell you what I have done so far is I did call the governor's office and talked to a guy, and he gave me a voicemail, and I'm waiting for the governor's office to call me. I did that today. I have called, I have spoken to the council president, and it's going to be on the agenda Monday night. And I asked that like a standing thing. We decided to have the Charahoe budget as a standing item, but also to write a letter to the governor or something of that nature. So I'm going to come up with some ideas for a letter, and I'll give it to Lisa or get it to Lisa. I'll email it to her, a very brief letter to the governor. The issue is what is the legal issues? And I know years ago when we had a financial town meeting, we didn't adopt the budget by July 1st, and they had to have a special way to keep the Hopkinton police going and all this other stuff. That's when I think Almond was the governor, and when we had the town annual financial town meeting format that people actually voted at the meeting. I'm concerned with not having a vote on the referendum. Not having a vote on referendums, because I believe that it disenfranchises people. But Sylvia just read the Charahoe Act, what it said about reverting back to the previous budget. But the interesting thing is the Charahoe School Committee knew there was a problem in April of this year when they were supposed to have their vote. Our meeting is in June. That's like 3 months later. So the big question is, where has the Charahoe School Committee been on something that's supposedly
In
really...
lockdown, in quarantine.
But that's...
I mean, Scott, that was not even possible in March or April.
Hold
It's
on,
just not possible. I mean, for heaven's sake, they weren't allowing anyone going anywhere in New England, and they certainly wouldn't have allowed an election. It's not something they did to be evil. They simply, it was not allowed. This is a brand new idea. A pandemic overrides everything because it's the health and safety of people. And it overrides all of our charters, all of our commissions, and it will go back to normal. We all want the normality. We all want the budget to be a referendum. But let's not say, gee, why didn't you have it, when it's perfectly obvious why they didn't have it.
Okay, Scott, go ahead.
Well, the facts are simply this. I'm a candidate in the presidential primary for delegate. And on June 2nd, a number of people, over 900 in the town of Hopkins so far, as I understand it, have gotten absentee ballots. But that election is still taking place on June 2nd. And I know it's a limited number of polling places that are going to be open. That's a fact. Also a fact that in April, when that happened, the school committee should have moved and got some more answers. Everything from absentee ballots for voters and things of that nature. So they should have immediately came up with some options with the Secretary of State. And pandemic has nothing to do with meetings. We have a pandemic going on in this Hopkinton Town Council's meeting. So the school committee should have came up with some ideas to address voting. And here we are into May, and their election was in April, which they canceled, they should have came up with an answer within a month's time. It would seem, and maybe I'm a little harsh and maybe I'm overdoing it, but at the same time, here we are in June, and we might have to do the same thing. But you're trying to tell me that we're having a presidential primary with absentee voting that's taking place on June 2nd, and the polls are still going to be open for people to go if they choose to vote, and the polling place is going to be open here at the town hall for the town of Hopkinton.
May I speak?
What?
Correct.
May I
Correct, Scott.
speak? This
Go
is
ahead,
Lisa.
Go ahead.
I will say there are not many people who want to work at the polls at this point. They do not want to be exposed, even though we're going to take every measure that we can to keep everybody safe. I've had more people tell me no. They do not want to work because they do not want to be exposed than I have had people say yes.
Comment?
Yeah,
That is a problem.
Yeah, and-
That's a problem. And I can't promise them, I cannot say they will be safe, even though we put in every measure we can think of that has been discussed and that we all have heard about. People are not comfortable. They do not want to work. And I don't blame them.
Well, we're going to have to get somebody, right? Because it's going to go off without it.
We're trying.
Yeah.
I've got 3 people so far.
Well, you know, the bottom line is, in reference to, I hear what you're saying, Lisa. I'm of the opinion, and when we have to have an election, whatever that is going to be, whatever the first one is, we're going to need help from the Board of Elections and the Department of Health, additional help. And if we only have 2 poll workers, they're either going to give us permission to have 2 poll workers or 1 poll worker and 1 supervisor for the Charahoe vote, or they're going to
We're
help us
working on
out
it.
in some way. If we have to have it, they're going to have to help us. And, but Charahoe, they have not communicated with this town since, well, they haven't communicated at all. The only communication they've had in reference to what are they going to do was when they sent an email to Lisa and asked how many registered voters you have.
Yeah, if that was this
We
week.
don't, yeah, and we don't have, and that was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
We don't have 6,700 people that show up. When the Charahoe vote comes, it might be 300 people, it might 250. And in extreme times when there was some issue, we had hundreds, okay, maybe 700 people or something. That's rare. So anyway, when it comes to the town budget and our vote on June 9th, we have a legal question, and that is Charahoe, somebody at Charahoe, are they expecting that, oh gee, maybe if the towns have the vote on their budget and the budget passes, does that mean that now they, well, the school budget has passed. The other issue is how can, and if our budget gets voted down, does that mean Charahoe got voted down? That doesn't work that way. That's not the way it's done. But those are the kinds of questions that are coming up. So the other one is, how can we have a June 9th vote? How can we possibly move forward with that when we don't have a Charahoe budget yet? So I don't.
That's my point.
So
too.
that's a big, big problem, which will
Yep.
have to be addressed and looked at. And so anyway, that it really is a mess, but we have to communicate with Charahoe and the governor's office on one end and communicate with Charahoe. We've got to have a budget vote. We have to have a vote on the school budget. So advertise it and pick a date and let's go.
Right. So
Jeez.
what I'm envisioning is that the timeframes will be extended out, and there'll be probably a mail ballot of some sort or something like
Or a
that.
very slow line, and it's
Yeah,
very slow, and you
right.
take 2 people or 1
But-
person at a time, and it
Yeah.
goes very slow.
Right.
But you don't have 1,000 people show up to vote.
No.
So,
So we'll get into a more
It's not
spirited.
as difficult as it's not as difficult as if it was a presidential primary or presidential election.
Yeah.
Sylvia's
No,
right. There's not a lot of
I'd like
people
to
that will
see-
do that.
I'm sorry, Barbara. I'd like to see Frank communicate with the governor's office. I'd like to see him communicate with Charahoe and let them know we're having our meeting on Monday night. And right now, we need the governor to know that if there's anything going on behind the scenes, no. This is not a Charahoe problem. This is a town problem.
Right.
They're not running the election. They haven't asked us to run one, and they should be asking us and giving us a date. And then we have an election. And if we have a problem, we talk to the state, we talk to the Department of Health. We have to have a date. We have to have an election, period. And they need to know to do that.
Right.
Unless they don't want to, and then they'll have to use the previous year's budget, which is fine with me.
Yeah, because I think it's operationally, I talked to Brian on this today. I think it's, according to Sue Rogers from the conference call last night at the meeting, it's, I think, a 2% reduction operationally from last year to this year. So enrollment's always has to be paid for. But
And just
enrollment increases, I should say.
historically, just so you'll know that there was a time, maybe more than once, but the most recent one was the Charahoe budget was voted down in a particular year. It got voted down a second time. Meanwhile, the town budget did have its budget. I mean, but in the end, we'd have to check the dates on that. But the budget was voted down a couple of times, and then eventually, I think it went past the town budget time. I can't be sure on that. I have to check the dates. Maybe Lisa, you remember? Remember when
For the
Charahoe?
Charahoe budget, there was
Yeah,
a
when-
time where it was voted down twice and it
Right.
went through on the third vote.
The third time
Yep.
it went through.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Lisa, whether because of that, we ended up even having a town vote, or did it get settled before our June 9th?
I believe it was settled before our
Okay.
vote. That was a trying season.
Mhm.
But you got to understand the Charahoe vote is in April, so they have a bigger bite at the apple because the fiscal year starts July 1st and the Hopkinton vote is always in June. What I'm thinking, and this is just me off the top of my head, is that whatever the education amount that's adopted in the Charahoe budget has to become part of the education line item of the three towns. So even if a Hopkinton budget was adopted short of the Charahoe vote, and this is just me speculating, but I think it's plausible, that when the Charahoe vote is finally decided, it becomes part of the Hopkinton's portion becomes part of our line item for education. We can't change that anyways. Once the Charahoe budget is decided, the town of Hopkinton cannot change that number in its budget anyways. Because that's what our
And then
share.
the other alternative is for us to put in our budget, Charahoe's last year budget, or the budget that would be maintenance of effort. Then we could pass our budget with Charahoe's budget at the maintenance of effort for the prior year.
Brian has a comment on that.
Well, the only thing I would say on, if we were to level fund what was in last year's budget, the problem would be that we had a increase in enrollment. So even if they level fund Hopkinton,
They have that number. They have that number, Brian. They gave it to everyone last night.
right, and
They gave us
I did some calculations today.
Mhm.
So we would see, even if they level funded their budget from last year, their total operating budget with debt services, we would still see an increase of 388,000 just on the enrollment shift. And then
yeah, and what they said in
Richmond would see the 388,000 decrease
Right.
because the bottom line is zero net change, but just the enrollment shift would increase us.
what it would increase. They gave those notes last night so that if you have the enrollment shift and it was last year's budget, Hopkinton would be 19,709, 167. So it would be going up 1.92% if level funded with the students as of October 1st. So Susan did that one last night as well. So
Right.
that we could always put that one in our budget, and if we had to run it without Charahoe's budget having been passed or not passed.
But that's less than the 3.69 we're at now, so I gotta think that it's.
Correct.
It's gotta be less, it's
Yeah.
gotta be a benefit
Oh, yeah.
to using last year's.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is a benefit.
Just sort of-
Absolutely.
So then are you saying that if they don't get a Charahoe vote before June 9th, then what we're voting on June 9th is the number you just said, Barbara, with the 1979?
Yeah. We'd
And
have
they
to
have-
talk to Kevin, but
and
we could
that
put that in the
Charahoe-
budget.
And that
Yeah,
Charahoe
I mean-
has no opportunity to increase it because they didn't have a vote.
Bill
I have
wants,
no idea.
Bill wants to just quickly chime in, folks.
Send him straight, Bill.
No, I just wanted to make a correction that June 9th is our schedule, the town budget referendum that's scheduled, not Charahoe's.
Correct. But if Charahoe hasn't done anything by June 9th, are we going to have our vote on June 9th? And if we did have our vote on June 9th, then Charahoe cannot increase. They can't, if they haven't had a vote by then, they can't have a vote in the future and change us.
You're not going to get your answers tonight, Sharon. We're going to have to look at this, look
Get
at
into more
legal.
detail on, we're
Yep.
preparing for this discussion on
Mhm.
Monday night, so
Yep.
I've been working on the agenda, so.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, anything else from the council?
I move we-
I still want to ask one more question on this. Is it possible that we could change our vote from June 9th to maybe the third week in June?
That's what we're looking at.
Possible.
That's
That's
what we're,
possible, Sharon.
yeah, that's what we're
Okay.
looking at, Sharon, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Good night, everyone. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good
Thank you
night.
all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.